Hello, everybody. This is Gerald Salenti, and it's Wednesday, November 20th, 2024. And once again, we're very honored to have with us Judge Andrew Napolitano, a man of men, someone who knows the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and writes about it, talks about it, teaches about it like nobody else in America that I know of. And if anybody could find me anybody else that could match it, please let me know. And Judge, thanks for being here. And we're in a very difficult time right now, as we have been for a while, but it seems like they're ramping up that Ukraine war. And one of the covers of our Trends Journal, 2 days before the Ukraine war began, from COVID war to Ukraine war to World War. We wrote that on February 22nd, 2022. And here we are.
Here we are with President Biden either knowingly and directly or allowing his aides to do so, authorizing the use of long-range American missiles striking inside Ukraine. Now, if you read the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the Financial Times, if you watch Fox, NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, you will think that the Ukrainians are using these weapons. They are not. Americans are using them. The weapons are so sophisticated, they require a download of data from an American satellite. That download is top secret. Only Americans can participate in that. It then requires the use of that data to aim and ignite these. The using, aiming, and igniting is top secret and can only be done by Americans. So when President Putin and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov say the Americans are shooting at us, we're at war with the United States, they are literally correct. It's not a figure of speech. They are literally correct. Thanks to Joe Biden, Americans are firing missiles into Russia. 2 days ago, they fired 6 missiles. The Russians shot down 5 of them. One of them destroyed a Russian ammunition depot. You know, there were all kinds of secondary and tertiary explosions because it was ammunition that was hit. It was obliterated. It was a tremendous conflagration caused, but nobody was killed. Does Joe Biden care about morality? No. Does he care about the international law? No. Does he even care about military significance? These weapons offer no military significance to the Russians. He either doesn't care or doesn't understand about that. On top of that, yesterday he authorized the use of anti-personnel mines. Now, he said 2 years ago he would never authorize the firing of American missiles into Russia or anti-personnel mines. There are 2 kinds of anti-personnel mines. One is triggered by the victim. You step within a radius of it and it explodes. The other is triggered remote control. You see the victim on a computer screen and you detonate the weapon. We sent the ones where you actually step on it. These are illegal in 160 countries in the world, not the United States, Russia, Ukraine, China, or Iran. So it's a mess that Biden created with Ukraine. I wrote about it this week in my column, Biden's Lust for War. I tried in the column to present an explanation for this war. It did not start in 2022. It started in 2014 with the CIA and MI6 orchestrated coup. It then proceeded to the puppet regime that the U.S. and the British installed, bombing their own people who were Russian-speaking and Russian cultural in an area that had been part of Russia since before the United States seceded from Great Britain. And then Joe Biden and Boris Johnson, the then Prime Minister of Great Britain, said to Netanyahu, don't go along with that treaty that your people and the Russians negotiated and initialed. We'll give you all the ammunition you want, and we'll give you a membership in NATO. And that was the last straw for Putin. How could he possibly have NATO on his border? He already has it with Poland. NATO means that the U.S. would be putting offensive weaponry right on the Russian-Ukrainian border. How would we react if the Chinese entered into a treaty with the Mexicans to put offensive weaponry on the other side of the Rio Grande aimed at Dallas and Houston and Atlanta and Chicago.
Yeah, everything you're saying. This is the Trends Journal going back to 2014. So how happy that guy is? It's about the United States overthrow, exactly what you were saying, of the democratically elected government of Viktor Yanukovych in 2014. This article, Washington is Driving the World to the Final War, is written by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, former Assistant Treasury Secretary under Richard Nixon. Ronald Reagan. This is what I'm just going to read you a quick part of it. He goes, "World hegemony is not a right America has earned." That was the subhead. Washington concluded that Russia needed to be confronted with or distracted by problems that would leave the Russian government less confident or able to counter Washington's aggression elsewhere. Ukraine presented the perfect opportunity for Washington to advance its hegemonic agenda. Everybody's forgotten about what I'm going to read you next. In a speech at the National Press Club last December, Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland boasted that Washington had invested $5 billion in non-governmental organizations in Ukraine for the purpose to, quote, teach democracy. Judge, that's December 2013. Anybody could Google up in YouTube, Victoria Nuland, Washington, D.C., Ukraine. And brought to you by Chevron and ExxonMobil, two signs around the other side of her. And there she is boasting about what we have to do in Ukraine to bring democracy. This is the same Victoria Nuland that was caught on the cell phone talking to Jeffrey Pyatt, who at that time, a little clown boy of nothing, was the United States ambassador to Ukraine. And she says to him on the phone, "Fuck the EU, we're bringing in Yats." That little clown boy, remember Yatsenyuk, after they overthrew Yanukovych. It was all planned. She and John McCain, may that arrogant bastard rot in hell for all the war that he's supported. People forget the United States, that the two of them, two people from the United States handing out cookies and candy in Maidan Square when the protests were going on to keep escalating it.
Right.
Could you imagine if the Russians were here at our peace conferences, our peace rallies, handing out cookies and candy? Could you imagine if the Russians were here? Oh my God. Oh, but the Americans could go over to Ukraine. This is an article, again, this whole issue, this is the spring when it used to be, the magazine was a quarterly. This is an article, you see this? This is from when the Sochi Olympics were going on, just prior to the overthrow of the government, and how the United States sold America to hate Russia before they overthrew the government. This is an article, security expert. It's not if, but when, for Sochi Olympics terror attack. This is from Yahoo News, January 16th, 2014. They overthrow the government in February. Veteran security consultant Bill Rathborn hopes that he's wrong about the upcoming Winter Olympics in Russia, but he has more than a hunch that he's not. Quote, "The security threat is higher than it's ever been in the history of the Olympic Games," Rathborn told you at Yahoo News. "In my opinion, it's not a matter of whether there will be some incident. It's just a matter of how bad it's going to be. They frightened the American people not to go to the Sochi Olympics. It tanked on the people watching it. They sold the hate. They were saying things like it was not safe to drink the yellow water. There were homophobes, stray dogs, all kinds of crap. They taught the people to hate the Russians before they attacked and overthrew Yanukovych. People don't know anything about this. And you write in your article about how this also began. And you say the war began in 2014 when the U.S. State Department and the CIA engineered a coup against the popularly elected and neutral-leaning government of Ukraine. This is what else happened, Judge. Ukraine's been broke since the breakup of the Soviet Union. They needed money. Yanukovych was going to make a deal with the IMF and the EU to borrow money. Putin said, listen, I got a better deal for you. I'm going to lower your oil and gas prices, and I'm going to give you a lower interest rate. No, you're not. No, you're not. That's when they overthrew the government.
Right.
And what you mentioned about what they were doing in the Donbass region, they killed over 15,000 Russian people in that region.
Correct. Ukrainian Russians.
Yep.
It's like Lincoln killing Americans in the South.
So again, people have no idea about this. And you go on to say over here that the American and British plotters of the 2014 coup did not expect resistance that their coup generated. Yet they looked the other way when the Ukraine government attacked its own people for demonstrating a decided affinity for Moscow over Kyiv. Again, people have no idea about what you're writing about here. And they have no idea of the horror that's being committed.
So, Trump says he's going to end the war in 24 hours. I don't know how he's going to do it. Biden apparently wants to visit his own foreign policy disasters on Trump, just as Biden believes Trump visited the collapse of American involvement in Afghanistan. We shouldn't have been there in the first place on Biden. So I guess it's a sort of tit for tat in Biden's view, without regard to morality, without regard to the law, without regard to military desirability. I mean, Ukraine is really on its last legs. My sources, who are excellent sources, tell me that the neocons in the State Department acknowledge this privately, not publicly. The people around Biden must acknowledge this. They want this horrific war caused by the United States of America and Great Britain to extend beyond January 20th, so that it ends in a conflagration on Trump's watch.
Judge, do you think that that has Trump come out against this? I don't know.
Well, Alex Jones ran a terrific statement by Trump, but now it appears as though it was not authentic. It was either AI or it was an actor portraying Trump. But it's about a 2-minute clip. Alex posted it on his Twitter account, and it sounded like you and me, Trump blasting Biden's extending the war and recognizing the mistakes of the United States from minute one. I ran it on Judging Freedom, and then we concluded that we couldn't authenticate it. We couldn't get an answer from Jones's people, and nobody else has run it. So the short answer to your question is I don't think Trump made any public comment beyond what he said in the campaign. The longer answer is there's this thing out there that looks and sounds very much like him in Mar-a-Lago, talking for about 2.5 minutes, but we don't know for sure that it is him.
Well, if he did that, it should be major news.
And it's
And he
not.
should be out there, being that he said, quote, he's going to end the war in 24 hours if he's elected. He should be out there condemning
Yes.
in full blast what Biden is doing.
Yes. And he hasn't been, except for this supposed statement, which we are reluctant to run again.
Now, do you think this is Biden's choice to do this with
I don't know how mentally degraded he is. I'm sure he's being advised to do it. I don't know if it requires his signature on a document, but I would imagine his two closest colleagues in this horrible venture, Secretary of State Blinken and National Security Advisor Sullivan, are strongly in favor of this. I haven't heard Blinken, but I've heard Sullivan speak out in favor of it. He's the one that announces the long-range missiles and the anti-personnel mines.
What an arrogant little boy he is.
That's a mess.
You write over here, you talk about the breakup of the Soviet Union. The George H.W. Bush administration promised the late Russian President Mikhail Gorbachev as much in return for the peaceful liberation of Eastern Europe and especially the unification of Germany. In other words, the deal was made, according to what's been written, between Gorbachev and was it James Baker, who was the guy under...
he was the Secretary of State for George H.W.
That, quote, NATO would not move 1 inch further.
Well, we're now 800 miles further. Putin tolerated that. It didn't happen on his watch. And when they tried to do it in Ukraine, that was the last straw.
And when they made that deal, when the Soviet Union broke up, there was 16 NATO countries, 16.
Right.
There are now 32.
Oh, Gerald, they want Japan. Last time I checked, Japan's in the Pacific. They want Japan to join NATO.
Well, they're right next to each other. Europe and Japan, they're only about that far apart on the map, I mean, this is disgusting.
Yeah. I am not optimistic because Trump's national security team, Marco Rubio, thrust upon him by Miriam Adelson, Pete Hegseth, who will say when Trump says bomb Tehran, instead of saying, have you considered the natural and probable consequences? He'll say, when do you want us to start, sir? Mike Waltz, who's itching to start a war with China. Mike Huckabee, who's a rabid, fanatical Zionist. I mean, these people are all itching for wars, whether it's the U.S. against Iran or the U.S. against Russia using Ukraine as the proxy. So I don't know how things are going to change once Trump's in. I don't believe in his heart he's in favor of these wars, but he has appointed all these neocons around him who will control the levers of power.
He just picked this guy for the Commerce Secretary. What's his name? He's a real pro-Zionist guy.
Oh, Howard Lutnick.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, one after another. And again, Judge, you talk about how they've taught us, they use Zelensky as a puppet since their purpose was not motivated by peace or empathy or justice, rather by hatred for all things Russian. They taught us to hate Russians when we were kids. Remember, they had us hiding under a desk in case an atom bomb went off?
Correct. We were taught to hate Russians as kids. I remember we sang some crazy nursery rhyme mocking Nikita Khrushchev's waistline in school. I mean, that's what the government is. That's one of the perfidies of public schools, which you and I call government schools, is the radicalization of youth to agree with the government.
Yeah, they taught again. I was scared stiff as a little kid, hiding under a desk as we're going through these air raid drills. And then when we got into high school, they had us standing up against the wall, remember, with our hands behind our back. And they say to you, if you see a flash, don't look at it. If I see a flash, I'll be dust in 6 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is they taught us to hate the Russians all our lives. And what nobody talks about is a thing called World War II. When what? Over 25 million Russians were killed by the Germans in Operation Barbarossa.
Right.
And John F. Kennedy's speech to graduating students at American University, he tells us not to hate the Russian people. They suffered more than anybody in World War II.
That speech arguably brought about his assassination.
I agree. That was in June of 1963.
Correct.
2 days from now, it was November 22nd.
Yeah.
Jack, you're dead. And no one is talking about peace. No one. They scared the hell out of us, taught us how to hate the Russians. Oh, and you know what else nobody talks about? The Russians helped America win World War II. They were the first to defeat the Germans.
Right.
Nobody talks about that. America won it. No, the Russians helped win the war. This is terrible. And we need peace on earth. So, Judge, thank you for all that you're doing. And everybody, you got to see the people that he's having on. You got to go to Judging Freedom. Judge, who's going to be on today just to tell the people how hard you work and all you do to give America the best it could be?
Ambassador Charles Freeman, Aaron Mate, Colonel Douglas McGregor, Phil Giraldi, Professor John Mearsheimer, Max Blumenthal, Colonel Larry Wilkerson.
All right.
All fans of Gerald Celente.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you for what you're doing. Listen to what he just said. This is one day. Look at this, how hard he's working. So it's up to you to do everything you can. Support Judging Freedom because the judge is supporting you. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Gerald. All the best.